Greetings, lore masters. Tonight our chronicle covers a path often taken by the ambitious, the dark-hearted, or simply the curious who didn't read the fine print, the seductive yet ultimately disastrous decision to embrace the curse of vampirism in Skyrim. We are stepping into the shadows of Castle Volkihar, examining the cold, dead skin of the undead, and cataloguing exactly why trading your humanity for a pair of glowing eyes is a trap of monumental proportions. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive a trip to Cold Harbour without some serious enchanted gear, or at least a very aggressive alchemy habit, so maybe it's best we explore this warning from the safety of your bed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, go ahead and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I always love imagining these stories drifting across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Dragonborn steps out of a damp Nord barrow, pockets heavy with ancient coins and the dust of Draugr bones. The sky above is a brilliant piercing blue, the kind of day that bards sing about in solitude, where the sun, Magnus himself, beams down with a golden intensity that warms the stone and melts the snow. For any other adventurer, this is a moment of relief, a breath of fresh air after hours in the dank dark. But for you, the newly turned vampire, it is immediate, sizzling agony. This is the first and perhaps most persistent reason to avoid the bite, the absolute misery of the burning sun and the zero regeneration mechanic that comes with it. It isn't just a cosmetic issue, nor is it merely roleplay flavor text. It is a fundamental breaking of the adventurer's loop. In the lore of the Elder Scrolls, the sun is not a star in the scientific sense, but a hole torn in the fabric of reality by Magnus, the architect of the mortal plane, as he fled creation. Through this hole, raw magicka flows from Aetherius into Mundus. It is pure, unadulterated energy. For the living, this is life-giving. For the undead, whose existence is an affront to the natural laws Magnus tried to design, this light is a cosmic rejection. It is the universe itself screaming that you do not belong. And in Skyrim, this rejection manifests as a crippling lethargy that turns the fabled Dragonborn into an asthmatic weakling the moment the clock strikes 5 AM. Imagine the scenario. You have just attained the powers of a vampire lord. You feel like a god. You have telekinesis. You can drain life. You can turn into a swarm of bats. You feel unstoppable. Then you fast travel to Whiterun to sell your loot. You arrive at noon. Suddenly, your screen flashes with that distinct ominous red tint, and the sound of searing flesh hisses in your ears. Your vampire blood boils in the sunlight, the game tells you, and just like that, your stat bars turn into stagnant pools. Your health, magicka, and stamina stop regenerating entirely. This is the weakness to sunlight debuff, and it is a logistical nightmare. In a game designed around exploration, around cresting mountains to see the sunrise, you are suddenly forced to play a game of shadows. If you sprint for 10 seconds to catch a butterfly, that stamina is gone. It does not come back. You have to stand there, panting, waiting for a potion cooldown or a spell, because your body has forgotten how to breathe. If you cast an invisibility spell to avoid a guard, that chunk of blue magicka bar is missing permanently until you find a roof. You're essentially a battery that cannot recharge, slowly draining with every action, becoming more useless the longer you exist outdoors. The fan community has debated this mechanic for over a decade. There is a persistent argument that this trade-off is balanced by the Necromage perk in the Restoration tree. The theory, and indeed the mechanical reality, is that because the game classifies a vampire player as undead, the Necromage perk, which makes spells more effective against undead, actually buffs all spells the player casts on themselves. Enchantments are stronger, durations are longer. It's a glitch that became a feature, a loophole that min-maxers love to exploit to create god-tier builds. But let's step back from the spreadsheet for a moment and look at the actual experience of playing. Is 25% stronger enchantments really worth the hassle of being unable to run across a field during the day without wheezing? There is a profound dissonance in being the saviour of the world, clad in Daedric armour forged in the fires of oblivion, yet being bullied by the time of day. It forces a playstyle that is inherently interruptive. You find yourself constantly pressing the wait button, watching the hours tick by just so you can walk to the next town without feeling like you're wading through molasses. It breaks the immersion of the hero's journey. Instead of a valiant knight, you become a nocturnal fugitive, hiding under bridge overhangs and hugging the shadowy sides of cliffs. The lore supports this misery, detailing that not all vampires suffer this equally, which makes your specific predicament feel even more tragic. We know from the in-game book Immortal Blood that different clans across Tamriel have different weaknesses. The Quara clan of Morrowind, for example, is fearsome but brutish, while the Tyrrhidilic vampires can actually blend into society if they feed enough. But the Volkihar strain, or the generic strain you contract from a random cave in Falkreath, seems particularly susceptible to this solar allergy. You're not a sparkling romantic interest, you're a creature being cooked alive in its own skin. Furthermore, the lack of regeneration fundamentally changes combat. Skyrim is a land of ambush. Bears do not care that it is 2 PM. Dragons do not check your watch before swooping down to roast you on the road to Winterhold. When a dragon attacks in broad daylight, which they almost always seem to do, you are fighting with one hand tied behind your back. You cast a few destruction spells and suddenly you're dry. You sprint to cover and you are exhausted. You take a hit and that health bar stays down. You are forced to chug potions like a desperate addict, burning through your inventory just to maintain the baseline functionality that a level 1 mortal has for free. There is a deep irony here, related to the broader metaphysics of the Orbis. The sun is the source of magicka. Vampires are magical creatures sustained by animus and blood. Yet, the very source of the magic that animates the world is poison to you. It suggests that vampirism is a closed loop, a parasitic existence that cannot draw from the infinite wellspring of Aetherius. You are cut off from the infinite. You are finite. And in a game as massive as Skyrim, feeling finite is a terrible sensation. Consider the simple joy of traversing the tundra. The music swells, Jeremy Soul's Secunda or The Streets of Whiterun plays softly. The wind rushes through the grass, the sun glints off the waterfalls near Markarth. As a vampire, this beauty is hostile. You're trained to flinch at beauty. You start to view the magnificent day-night cycle of the creation engine not as an aesthetic triumph, but as a menacing countdown. Oh look, a beautiful sunrise, you think, followed immediately by, oh no, I need to find a cave immediately. It turns the open world into a series of safe zones and danger zones, shrinking the vastness of Skyrim into a claustrophobic connect-the-dots puzzle of shadows. This mechanical debuff also reveals the tediousness of resource management. Skyrim is generally a forgiving game. It wants you to succeed. It regenerates your health automatically after a fight so you can keep moving. Vampirism removes this safety net during the hours when most NPCs are awake and active. If you want to interact with the world, buy supplies, turn in quests, talk to Jarls, you usually have to do it during the day. But doing so leaves you in your most vulnerable state. You're walking into the bustling market of Riften, surrounded by life and commerce, while your character is technically slowly dying. It creates a disconnect between the player's desire to participate in the world and the character's biological need to reject it. We must also touch on the stunted feeling of the attribute bars. It's not just that they don't regenerate. The cap is lowered depending on your stage of vampirism. At stage 4, you are suffering a massive reduction in health, magicka and stamina while in sunlight, up to 60 points. In the early to mid-game, 60 points is colossal. That's 6 levels worth of stat investments vanished just because the sun came up. You effectively de-level yourself every morning. You become a shadow of the hero you were the night before. And for what? A drain life spell that does mediocre damage? The ability to calm people who are already trying to kill you? The promise of vampirism is power. It is the allure of the forbidden, the strength of the predator. But the reality of the burning sun is the reality of a chronic illness. You're managing symptoms. You're checking the sky. You're carrying an excessive amount of potions just to function normally. You're not the master of the night. You're a slave to the day. The game mechanics do an excellent job of making you feel cursed, which is a triumph of design, but a failure of the power fantasy. You don't feel like Dracula. You feel like a person with a severe sun allergy who forgot their umbrella. And this misery is only the beginning. As we delve deeper into this list, we will find that the inconveniences pile up, layer upon layer, until the novelty of the glowing eyes fades entirely. But it starts here, under the harsh, judgmental gaze of Magnus, watching your stamina bar refuse to budge while a mud crab nips at your heels. It is a humble, humiliating reminder that in the contest between the ancient undead lord and the ball of gas in the sky, the ball of gas wins every time. So you've decided to brave the sunlight, or rather cower from it, and you've accepted that your stamina bar is now a finite resource during business hours. But perhaps you're the type of player who values aesthetics over mechanics. Maybe you spent 3 hours in the character creator meticulously sculpting the perfect Nord shield maiden or a brooding Dunmer spell sword. You adjusted the jaw width, the cheekbone height, the precise shade of war paint to match your eyes. You created a masterpiece, and then you let a vampire bite you. Welcome to reason number 2, the absolute cosmetic disaster that ruins your character creation. Let's be real for a second. We all play the Elder Scrolls for the fantasy, and a huge part of that fantasy is looking the part. Fashion Rim, or Fashion Scrolls, is the true endgame. We grind for Daedric armour not just because it has high defence, but because it looks terrifying. We wear the Nightingale hood because it makes us look mysterious. We care about our adventurer's face because we stare at it in kill cams and inventory screens for hundreds of hours. Vampirism takes that carefully crafted face and runs it through a blender of generic evil minion. The transformation is not subtle, and for many it is not an improvement. Upon contracting Sanguinar Vampiris and letting it incubate for 3 days, or accepting Harkon's gift, your character's face undergoes a forced morph. The game engine applies a complexion overlay that pales the skin to a sickly, greyish hue. But it doesn't stop at pale and interesting. It reshapes the geometry of the face. Cheeks become gaunt and sunken, creating a skeletal appearance that screams, "I haven't eaten in a century and I also have a vitamin D deficiency." But the worst offender, the detail that has caused countless players to reload an old save in horror, is the nose. For human races, Nords, Bretons, Imperials and Redguards, the vampire texture often adds a bizarre, bat-like split or vertical slit to the lip and nose area. It's intended to look predatory, perhaps a nod to the bat-themed powers of the vampire lord, but in practice, it often just looks like a botched surgery. That noble, straight nose you spent 20 minutes perfecting? Gone. Replaced by a squashed, angry-looking snout. Then there are the eyes. Now glowing eyes sound cool on paper. Who doesn't want to look supernatural? But the specific implementation in Skyrim is polarizing. The standard vampire eyes are a piercing, unnatural orange-yellow with a slit pupil. They glow brightly. In the dark, you look like a traffic hazard. This might be fine if you're going for a full-on monster vibe, but if you are trying to play a subtle, charismatic rogue who hides in plain sight, the glowing headlights in your skull are a dead giveaway. You look less like a seductive creature of the night and more like a possessed pumpkin. For the beast races, the cosmetic tragedy is different but equally painful. Argonians lose their vibrant scale colours, washing out into a muddy, dull grey. Their horns and feathers often lose their lustre. Khajiit fur becomes matted and desaturated, and their fangs, already prominent, can clip weirdly with the new facial geometry. The unique identity of your race is suppressed in favour of a universal vampire uniform that homogenizes the visual experience. Everyone just looks like they belong to the same weird subterranean club. There is also a strange, unintended side effect often discussed in the modding community: the dirt issue. For some reason, the vampire facial textures in the vanilla game often come with built-in grime. Your character looks dirty, not battle-hardened dirty, but hasn't washed their face in 400 years dirty. You can be the Thane of Solitude wearing fine raiment and jewellery, but your face looks like you just crawled out of a chimney. It clashes with high-level gear. You put on a pristine glass helmet, and underneath it is this grimy, snarling visage that looks like a bandit marauder rather than a hero. Lore-wise, this physical corruption makes sense. You are dead. Your body is a reanimated corpse sustained by blood magic. The bestiary of Tamriel describes vampires as having a feral appearance as the beast within takes over. But knowing the lore reason doesn't make it any less painful when you open the menu and see a stranger staring back at you. It is a loss of identity. You're no longer the Dragonborn hero of the North. You are that weird-looking guy with the glowing eyes. This cosmetic override is particularly frustrating because it is irreversible without curing the condition. You can't visit the face sculptor in the Ragged Flagon to fix it. Galathil, the terrifying flesh mage added in the Dawnguard DLC, explicitly refuses to work on you if you are undead. "I can't work on the dead," she says with professional disdain. "The flesh, it doesn't hold the shape, it snaps back." So, you are locked in. Your aesthetic choices are frozen at the moment of infection, overlaid with the vampire curse. If you wanted to change your war paint or hair colour, too bad. You're stuck with your decisions plus a bat nose. The community reaction to this was so strong that fix vampire face mods appeared almost immediately after the game's release. Players were desperate to keep the powers but lose the ugly. They wanted the Twilight vampire. Beautiful, pale, ethereal. Skyrim gave them Nosferatu after a week-long bender. This disconnect between player expectation, the romanticised vampire, and the game's delivery, the feral corpse, is a major friction point. There's also the issue of immersion breaking during dialogue. When the camera zooms in for a conversation, and you're trying to have a serious, heartfelt moment with an NPC, it's hard to take the scene seriously when your character looks like they're about to bite the quest giver's jugular. It changes the context of every interaction. You could be saving a kitten from a tree, but you look like you're about to sacrifice it to Molag Bal. It forces a villainous framing onto your character that you might not want. What if you want to be a tragic, reluctant vampire who fights for good? The game doesn't let you look the part, you just look evil. Even the vampire lord form, the ultimate power trip transformation, is a mixed bag aesthetically. While the wings and the hulking size are impressive, the actual model is, well, it's a bit grotesque. You turn into a grey, hairless, gargoyle-like creature with giant claws and a loincloth. It's certainly monstrous, but is it cool? That's subjective, but many players find it clunky and goofy looking, especially when it walks on the ground. The hovering animation is neat, but the moment you land, you waddle. The Lord of the Night shouldn't waddle, and let's not forget the armour. While not strictly a bodily change, joining the Volkihar clan pushes you toward wearing their armour, the Royal Vampire armour. It's actually one of the better looking sets in the game, with its cape and intricate leatherwork. But it clashes with almost everything else. If you try to mix and match pieces, you end up looking like a confused cosplayer. The aesthetic of the vampire faction is so strong, so specific, black, red, gothic, that it demands total commitment. You can't really be a heavy armour-wearing, shield-bashing vampire without looking ridiculous. The visual language of the game funnels you into a specific archetype, the robes-wearing mage or the light armour assassin. If you love the look of Daedric or Dragonplate, the vampire face sticking out of it just looks off. So, reason number 2 is a warning to the vain and the artistic. If you love your character's face, if you spent time getting that jawline just right, if you value the ability to look like a normal person, do not join the vampires. It is a one-way ticket to Ugly Town. You will lose your unique features, you will gain a permanent scowl, and you will spend the rest of your playthrough hiding your face under a helmet, which, ironically, hides the glowing eyes that were the only cool part to begin with. You trade your individuality for a generic monster mask, and in a role-playing game that is a high price to pay. Once you've come to terms with your ruined face and your crippling sun allergy, you might think, well, at least I get to hang out with the cool kids now. You imagine a secret society of sophisticated immortals, sipping vintage blood wine and discussing ancient history. Instead, you walk into Castle Volkihar and meet the man in charge, Lord Harkon, and very quickly, you realise that reason number 3 to avoid this faction is that Harkon is, without a doubt, the ultimate toxic boss. If Skyrim had a Department of Labour, the Volkihar clan would be buried under a mountain of lawsuits. Harkon isn't just a villain, he is the archetype of the narcissistic manager who steals credit for your work, gaslights his employees, and creates a hostile work environment just to feel important. From the moment you meet him, the dynamic is broken. You have just rescued his daughter, Serana, from a crypt where she was trapped for thousands of years, carrying an Elder Scroll no less. You deliver her to his doorstep. Does he hug her? Does he thank you profusely? No. He looks at her like she's a misplaced piece of luggage, and then offers you a gift that feels more like a bribe to buy your silence. The core in-game reality of serving Harkon is that you are never actually a lord in his eyes. You're a tool. The entire questline of the vampire faction revolves around his obsession with the tyranny of the sun prophecy. He wants to blot out the sun. To do this, he needs Oriel's bow and the blood of a daughter of Coldharbour. He's willing to drain his own daughter dry, literally killing her, to achieve a vague goal of dominance that he hasn't even fully thought through. This is a man who sacrificed 1,000 innocents to Molag Bal just to get his powers in the first place, and now he's ready to sacrifice the only family he has left. That's not leadership. That's just a midlife crisis with a body count. Working for him is an exercise in frustration. He pits his underlings against each other. The court politics of Castle Volkihar are defined by two sycophants, Orthiolf and Vingalmo, who are constantly trying to undermine one another to gain Harkon's favour. Harkon encourages this. He likes the infighting because it keeps anyone from challenging him. It's the classic dictator playbook. Keep the middle management fighting over scraps so they don't notice the CEO is driving the company off a cliff. As the player, you're thrown into this shark tank and expected to navigate it, fetching chalices and hunting down spies, all while Harkon sits on his throne complaining that things aren't moving fast enough. There is a fascinating, slightly obscure lore tidbit found in the dialogue trees that reveals the depth of his delusion. If you speak to Valerica, Harkon's estranged wife, she reveals that Harkon wasn't always this bad. He was once a powerful king in an era lost to history, but he feared mortality above all else. His pact with Molag Bal wasn't born out of a desire to rule, but out of a pathetic fear of death. The mighty Lord Harkon is actually a coward. He is terrified of the natural end, and his entire existence, his entire empire of stone and blood, is just a fortress built to hide a scared little man from the inevitability of the grave. It recontextualizes every interaction. When he threatens you, it's not from a place of strength, but from a desperate need to maintain control over the one thing he can't control: his own fate. The fan community has long debated whether Harkon is actually the most incompetent villain in the entire Elder Scrolls series. The debate centers on his plan. We'll touch on the ecological suicide of it later, but purely from a leadership perspective, his plan is awful. He ignores the growing threat of the Dawnguard completely. He dismisses Isran's hunters as a nuisance, even as they gather trolls and crossbows specifically designed to kill him. He's so focused on his mystical goal that he neglects the defense of his own home. It falls to you, the new hire, to actually deal with the threats. You are the one destroying the Dawnguard leaders. You are the one finding the bow. Harkon is just the guy in the corner office taking credit for the quarterly earnings while playing solitaire. Furthermore, the atmosphere he cultivates is just depressing. There is no joy in Harkon's court. In the Dark Brotherhood, there is a twisted sense of family. Astrid, despite her faults, calls you brother or sister, and there is camaraderie around the fire. In the Thieves' Guild, there is honour among thieves and a shared goal of wealth. In the Companions, there is the bond of the Shield siblings. In Castle Volkihar, everyone hates everyone. The cattle are moaning in the dungeon, the court members are plotting murders, and Harkon is brooding on his throne. It is a miserable place to spend your time. You don't feel like part of an elite order. You feel like you're stuck at the worst family reunion in history, and the doors are locked. There is also the matter of his teaching style. When he transforms you into a vampire lord, the tutorial is condescending. He speaks to you like you're a slow child, explaining the powers with a sneer. "Behold the power," he says, while you fumble with the controls. And if you ever question him, if you ever suggest that maybe killing Serana isn't a great idea, he instantly turns on you. There is no loyalty. The moment you are not 100% useful to his specific delusion, you are an enemy. This culminates in the final confrontation. It is inevitable. The questline doesn't end with you ruling by his side. It ends with you killing him because he tries to kill you. He was never going to share power. The court was a lie. He intended to be the sole ruler of the night, and you were just a delivery mechanism for the bow. Compare this to the other factions. The Archmage gives you his quarters. The Harbinger passes the torch. Even the listener is revered. Harkon just wants you dead once the job is done. So why join a faction where the leader is actively plotting your demise? Why serve a boss who micromanages, gaslights, and eventually attempts workplace violence? Lord Harkon is a cautionary tale of power without wisdom. He's a petty tyrant with bad skin and daddy issues, and serving him is a thankless, grinding job that offers zero benefits package and a severance plan that involves a sword through the chest. You're better off freelancing. Leaving behind the toxic boardroom politics of Lord Harkon, you step back out into the open world, hoping to vent your frustrations on some local bandits or wildlife. But here, you encounter reason number 4, a weakness so fundamental to the geography and bestiary of Skyrim that it feels like the developers were playing a cruel joke on you. We are talking, of course, about your newfound catastrophic vulnerability to fire. In a province literally defined by the return of fire-breathing lizards, you have voluntarily turned yourself into a walking bundle of dry kindling. Let's look at the tactical absurdity of this situation. Skyrim is cold. It is a land of snow, ice, and biting winds. Naturally, the inhabitants fight back against the cold with fire. It is everywhere. Every bandit camp has a bonfire, every dungeon has torches, every mage seems to favour the Destruction School's flame branch because it's the most magicka efficient. And most importantly, the main antagonists of the game, the dragons, are split roughly 50-50 between frost breath and fire breath. By becoming a vampire, you have taken a coin flip on your survival every time a shadow passes overhead. If it's a frost dragon, you laugh, shrugging off the ice with your vampire resistance. But if it's a blood dragon, an elder dragon, or an ancient dragon that breathes fire, you are in for a world of hurt. The mechanics here are punishing. Depending on your stage of vampirism, your weakness to fire ranges from 20% to a staggering 50% in the base game, and even higher with certain difficulty mods or older patch versions. Let's do the math on that. If an ancient dragon's breath attack deals, say, 100 points of damage per second, and you are a stage 4 vampire, you are taking 150 points of damage per second. That isn't just a debuff, that is a melting point. In a game where health bars can vanish in an instant on higher difficulties like Master or Legendary, that extra 50% damage is the difference between using a potion and reloading a save. There is a visceral panic that sets in when you hear the specific Yoltor Shul shout. As a mortal, you might tank the hit, hide behind a rock, or pop a resistance potion. As a vampire, the moment that cone of orange flame touches your hitbox, your health bar drains like water from a smashed vase. The screen turns that violent, blinding red, your character screams, a sound that seems distinctively more desperate when you're undead, and you're reduced to ash before you can even unsheath your weapon. It forces you to play Skyrim, a game about being a Nord demigod, like a terrified rabbit. You spend dragon fights cowering behind pillars, spamming ward spells that shatter in 2 seconds, or desperately trying to interrupt the dragon's shout with a bash. You are the Dragonborn, the ultimate dragon slayer, yet you're terrified of a campfire. This vulnerability extends beyond dragons. Consider the average dungeon crawl. You're sneaking through a Draugr crypt. You step on a pressure plate. We've all done it. Usually a swinging blade hits you or a ram traps you. But sometimes it's those hanging oil lanterns. They drop, shatter, and ignite the oil slick on the floor. For a mortal, this is an annoyance. Ouch, hot, you say, stepping out of the fire. For a vampire, this is a fatality. You're standing in a pool of liquid death. The damage ticks are accelerated. You die to a trap designed to kill level 5 bandits. It is humiliating. There is a core in-game fact that makes this even worse. The oil spider and flame atronach interactions. Flame atronachs are common summons for enemy mages. When they die, they explode. If you are a vampire melee character, you're essentially punished for winning. You rush in, slice down the atronach, and its death explosion creates a shockwave of fire that, thanks to your weakness, strips away half your health. You are penalised for engaging in melee combat with one of the most common enemies in the game. It turns every fight against a necromancer coven into a game of the floor is lava. Lore-wise, this weakness is deeply rooted in the metaphysics of the Elder Scrolls universe. Fire is often seen as a cleansing agent, a release of energy that returns matter to a base state. But there is a more obscure lore tidbit found in the text Galur Ithari's papers, connected to the buoyant armigers of Morrowind. While the text primarily discusses the possibility of a cure, it touches on the theological aspect of vampirism being a corruption of the blood. Fire, being an element associated with change and energy, and often linked to the chaotic creativity of the Padomaic forces or the raw energy of Aetherius, reacts violently with the static, dead stasis of the vampire. The vampire is a creature of cold preservation. Fire is the element of hot destruction. The two cannot coexist. Your body is essentially a dried husk held together by dark magic. Introducing fire is like introducing a match to a library of old, dry scrolls. This leads to one of the most enduring debates in the fan community: the Dunmer meta. Because the Dark Elves, Dunmer, have a passive racial ability that grants them 50% resistance to fire, players have argued for years that the Dunmer are the only viable race for a vampire playthrough. The logic is that the racial resistance cancels out the vampire weakness, bringing you back to a neutral 0%. Fans debate whether this is min-maxing or simply necessary for survival. Is it fair that to play a vampire effectively, you are pigeonholed into playing a specific race? If you want to be a Nord vampire, which fits the Dawnguard setting perfectly, you are statistically punished. The community remains divided on whether this is good RPG design, race matters, or bad balance, restrictive playstyles. But let's go back to the experience of the weakness itself. It forces you to waste your enchantment slots. To counteract the fire vulnerability, you almost have to enchant your boots or necklace with resist fire. This means you're using a slot that could have been used for Fortify One-Handed or Regenerate Magicka. You're not enchanting to get stronger, you're enchanting just to stop being weaker. You're running to stand still. This is the definition of a trap. You take the vampire powers for the buffs, but you spend all your gear slots mitigating the debuffs, resulting in a net 0 gain in power, but a massive increase in maintenance. And let's not forget the fire mages. In the late game, high-level pyromancers cast Incinerate. This spell hits like a truck. Against a vampire, it hits like a freight train loaded with explosives. These mages often come in groups. You turn a corner in a fort and 3 mages simultaneously cast Incinerate. You are vaporized. The kill cam triggers, showing your character ragdolling through the air wreathed in flames, a tragic end to a hero who conquered Alduin but couldn't handle a generic wizard named Apprentice. The visual feedback of being on fire is also incredibly disruptive. When you are burning, the screen creates a haze, and the sound of the roaring flames drowns out other audio cues. You can't hear footsteps, you can't see the archer in the corner. The sensory overload of the burning state contributes to the panic. It disorients you, and because you are a vampire, that state lasts longer and hurts more, meaning you spend more combat encounters blind, deaf, and dying. There is also the irony of the Dawnguard DLC adding the crossbow to the game. The Dawnguard hunters often use exploding bolts of fire. The game introduces a faction specifically designed to hunt you, and gives them the one weapon that exploits your biggest weakness. Every time you encounter a Dawnguard patrol, you have to worry about being sniped by a firebolt that will take off a chunk of your health before you even see the shooter. The game is actively conspiring to make your life miserable through thermal dynamics. So, reason number 4 is a simple matter of survival. Do you want to be the hero who stands amidst the dragon's fire, shield raised, laughing at the heat? Or do you want to be the guy who has to hide in a pond because a dragon looked at him the wrong way? Fire is the primal element of power in Skyrim. By becoming a vampire, you forfeit your mastery over it and become its victim. You become flammable in a world that loves to burn. Surviving the fire-breathing dragons and the toxic management of Lord Harkon is one thing, but now we must address the mundane, grinding reality of your daily existence. Reason number 5 is the endless, repetitive, and frankly awkward chore of feeding. While other RPGs might treat vampirism as a permanent buff or a simple toggle, Skyrim treats it like a Tamagotchi that you have to keep alive with the blood of the innocent, and let me tell you, that digital pet gets hungry very, very fast. The core in-game fact driving this misery is the stage system. Vampirism in Skyrim operates on a 4-stage progression clock. Every 24 hours without blood, your vampirism deepens. You move from stage 1 to stage 2 and so on. Now, here is the counterintuitive kicker that has baffled players for over a decade. In the Elder Scrolls logic, starving yourself actually makes your vampiric powers stronger, but it also makes your weaknesses, sunlight and fire, exponentially worse. So if you want to avoid being incinerated by a stray torch or rendered useless by the sun, you have to feed. You have to reset the clock back to stage 1. This turns your epic adventure into a never-ending hunt for a bed. And not just any bed, an occupied bed. You can't just drink a health potion, you need a warm body. This forces you into a gameplay loop that feels less like being a master of the night and more like being a creepy voyeur. You finish a glorious dungeon crawl, your inventory full of loot, and instead of heading to a merchant, you have to fast travel to a small village, let's say Riverwood, and wait until 2 AM. Then you have to break into Faendal's house, you have to sneak up to his bed, you have to hover over his sleeping form like a mosquito with a persecution complex, wait for the prompt, feed, and click it. It's humiliating. You are the Dragonborn. You have shouted down mountains, and here you are, crouching in a woodcutter's bedroom hoping he doesn't wake up and call the guards because you forgot to bring a packed lunch. It disrupts the flow of the game entirely. You can't just explore. You have to plan your route around population centres with accessible sleepers. I'd love to explore that remote glacier, you think, but there's nobody to bite up there, and if I hit stage 4, the sun will cripple me. You're tethered to civilization by your own thirst. The mechanics of feeding are also surprisingly clunky. Often, the feed prompt doesn't appear immediately. You have to position yourself at the exact right angle. If you're standing too close, you might accidentally pickpocket instead. If you're not in sneak mode, you just wake them up, and then you have a bounty on your head for breaking and entering an assault. It's a fumble fest, and if you have followers, good luck. They often like to stomp around or stand in the doorway, blocking your escape or waking up your victim. I am sworn to carry your burdens, Lydia says, while watching you violently assault a sleeping farmer. It's awkward for everyone involved. The Dawnguard DLC tried to mitigate this with the introduction of Potion of Blood, items that count as a feeding. You can find these in Castle Volkihar or craft them if you have the right setup. But this just changes the chore from hunting people to farming potions. You still have to manage the inventory space. You still have to remember to drink them. It becomes another meter to manage, another red blinking light on your dashboard. It feels like diabetic management for the undead, turning a supernatural curse into a medical condition. There is a fascinating, obscure lore tidbit that highlights the tragedy of this hunger. In the book Opusculus La Mebalta Mesamorti, it describes the experience of the first vampire, La Mebalfag. It speaks of the hunger not as a desire, but as a scream in the blood. The lore suggests that the hunger is a torment, a constant gnawing void that can never be filled, only temporarily silenced. In the game, this is represented by the text message, "Your vampire blood boils," or "You thirst for blood." It's the game nagging you. It's a notification you can't swipe away. It is the developers poking you in the ribs, whispering, "Hey, go be a parasite." This leads to the reverse progression debate, a massive point of contention in the fan community. In almost every other vampire fiction, from Dracula to the Vampire Chronicles, feeding makes the vampire powerful. Blood is strength. In Skyrim and Oblivion before it, feeding makes you weaker. It suppresses your powers. It makes you more human. Fans have argued for years that this is backward. Why should I be punished for doing the one thing vampires are supposed to do? Why does drinking blood make me lose my high-level spells? The theory is that the human blood dilutes the vampiric corruption, allowing you to pass as mortal, while starving allows the Daedric curse to take full hold. But from a gameplay perspective, it sends mixed signals. The game incentivizes you to starve to get the cool powers, like Vampire Seduction or Embrace of Shadows, but punishes you for starving with the debilitating sun-fire weakness. You're constantly trying to find a sweet spot stage where you aren't useless but also aren't on fire. It's a balancing act that requires constant micromanagement. You aren't playing a power fantasy, you're playing a spreadsheet of diminishing returns. And let's talk about the cattle. If you join the Volkihar, you gain access to the vampire cattle, thralls kept in the castle dungeon specifically to be fed upon. This is meant to be a convenience, a water cooler for the vampires. But have you actually looked at them? They are bandaged, moaning, broken people. Using them makes you feel dirty. It brings the horror of your condition front and centre. It's not cool combat feeding, it's factory farming. Every time you go down, there to top off, you're reminded that you are a monster. And not the cool anti-hero kind, but the kind that keeps people in a basement. It kills the roleplay vibe for anyone trying to maintain a shred of morality. Even the vampire lord perk Savage Feeding, which lets you feed on enemies you've just killed, is glitchy and situational. It requires a specific power attack kill move to trigger. Half the time, the ragdoll physics launch the body away before you can feed, or your follower kills them first. It's unreliable. You can't count on it in the heat of battle, so you end up back in Riverwood, creeping on Faendal again. The chore extends to your social life in-game too. In the vanilla game, pre-DLC, Being a Stage 4 vampire meant every guard and citizen would attack you on sight. While Dawnguard removed this instant aggression for Stage 4, unless you're in Lord form, the stigma remains in the mechanics. You still get comments. His skin, it's pale as the snow, guards mutter. You feel like an outsider. But the real penalty is the time lost. Every minute you spend finding a victim is a minute you aren't questing, crafting or levelling. Over a 100-hour playthrough, the feeding tax adds up to hours of wasted time. So, reason number 5 is the tedium. It is the realisation that immortality comes with a lot of housekeeping. You trade your freedom for a feeding schedule. You become a slave to the hunger, forced to interrupt your heroic destiny to snack on the sleeping habits of the Nords. It turns the Dragonborn into a bedbug, and honestly, you have better things to do with your time than lurk in people's bedrooms. If the daily grind of feeding and the annoyance of sunburns haven't deterred you, perhaps a look at your new spiritual patron will. We often treat Daedric princes in the Elder Scrolls like vending machines. You put in a quest, you get out a cool artifact. But when you become a vampire lord, you're not just completing a transaction, you're pledging your immortal soul to Molag Bal. And reason number 6 is simply this. Molag Bal is, without hyperbole, the most repulsive, hateful, and terrifying entity you could possibly serve. In the pantheon of Oblivion, there are shades of grey. Azura is vain but protective. Hircine is savage but sportsmanlike. Even Sheogorath has a twisted sense of humour. Molag Bal has none of these redeeming qualities. His sphere is domination and enslavement of mortals. His title is the King of Rape, the Prince of Schemes, the Harvester of Souls. By accepting his gift, you are not joining a cool club of rebels. You are voluntarily branding yourself as the property of a cosmic rapist, whose only joy comes from the suffering and subjugation of others. Let's look at the core in-game fact of his gift. In the Dawnguard questline, when you speak to Serana about her origins, the conversation takes a dark, quiet turn. She explains that to become a daughter of Cold Harbour, a pure-blooded vampire, she and her mother were offered to Molag Bal. She doesn't go into graphic detail, but the implication is heavy and horrifying. The ritual is a degrading, violent ordeal where the initiate must survive the direct physical domination of the prince himself. It is not a blessing bestowed with light. It is a curse forced upon the body through trauma. When you accept Harkon's blood, you are drinking the distilled essence of that trauma. You are participating in a lineage born from the absolute violation of a woman's autonomy. This isn't just edgy backstory, it is the fundamental metaphysical reality of what you are. You're a creature of corruption. The obscure lore text, Opusculus Lame Bal ta Mezzamorti, details the origin of the very first vampire, Lame Beolfag. She was a Nedic virgin and a priestess of Arkay, the god of the cycle of life and death. Molag Bal, in his hatred for Arkay, didn't just kill her, he defiled her. He ravaged her and left a single drop of his blood on her brow. When she died, she did not pass to Aetherius. She rose, tearing through her own funeral pyre, screaming in agony and slaughtering her own coven. Vampirism was created as a middle finger to the gods of light. It is a biological blasphemy designed to mock the sanctity of life. When you play as a vampire, you're the punchline to this cruel joke. You're walking around Skyrim carrying the DNA of a god who hates you. Molag Bal does not love his children. He views vampires not as his chosen people, but as his tools to infect and ruin Mundus. You are a vector for his plague. Think back to the quest, the House of Horrors in Markarth. You hear his voice. It is guttural, commanding, and utterly devoid of empathy. Crush him, he commands you, forcing you to beat a priest of Boethia to death with a rusty mace. That is your boss. That is the voice that will whisper to you for eternity. This leads to a chilling realization about your afterlife. In the Elder Scrolls universe, souls are real currency. When a mortal dies, they usually go to the plane of the god they worshipped, or to the dreams leave to be recycled. But you have a claim on your soul, a lien, if you will. Fan communities have debated the Dragonborn soul claim for years. The idea that because the Dragonborn is a shard of Akatosh, the Time Dragon, their soul is too big or powerful for the Daedric princes to claim. They argue that Akatosh gets first dibs. But consider the counter-argument, often discussed in deep lore threads. By accepting the Vampire Lord form, you are fundamentally altering your animus. You are overwriting your divine spark with the corruption of Baal. If the curse is strong enough, Do you really think Akatosh wants you back? Or does your soul, upon death, get dragged screaming into Cold Harbour? We have seen Cold Harbour in the Elder Scrolls Online. It is a blue, cold, industrial wasteland of torture chambers, slave pens, and endless toil. It is a place where souls are shriven, stripped of their memories and identity, and forced to build simulacrums of Tamriel for Bal's amusement. This is your retirement plan. By joining the vampires, you are effectively signing a contract that says, "Upon my death, please teleport me to a dimension of eternal torture where I will be nothing but a slave." It makes the Sovngarde ending of the main quest feel hollow. You stand in the Hall of Valor, eating ox with Ysgramor, but you know you don't belong there anymore. You are a wolf in the fold, a ticking time bomb of corruption. There is also the matter of divine hostility. By aligning with Molag Bal, you make yourself an enemy of almost every other deity. Arkay obviously wants you destroyed. Meridia, the Lady of Infinite Energies, hates the undead with a burning passion. Her quest, the Break of Dawn, involves purging a temple of necromancers. As a vampire doing that quest, you're essentially an exterminator who is also a cockroach. You are fighting against your own nature. Even the Aedra, who are generally passive, are metaphysically opposed to you. You are cutting yourself off from the support network of the universe. Healing spells burn you. Holy ground repels you. You're an anomaly that the immune system of the world is trying to reject. Harkon's obsession with the prophecy is a direct manifestation of Bal's influence. Molag Bal wants to merge Mundus with Cold Harbour, the plane meld. Harkon wants to blot out the sun. These goals align. Whether Harkon knows it or not, he's acting as an agent of the Planameld. By helping him, even partially, you're advancing an agenda that ends with the enslavement of all mortal races. You're not a grey character walking the line between light and dark. You're a villain. The game tries to soften this with the court politics, making it feel like a noble house. But look closer at the castle. The gargoyles, the blood fountains, the constant gloom. It is a shrine to misery. Molag Bal is the prince of schemes, but his schemes are rarely clever. They are brutal. He breaks things. He breaks people. Serana is broken. Valerica is broken. Harkon is broken. And now, you are broken. Fans often compare the vampire path to the werewolf path here. Hircine, the patron of werewolves, is a hunter. He values strength and the chase. His realm, the hunting grounds, is an eternal hunt. It's violent, sure, but it has a primal dignity to it. You hunt, you kill, you run. It's natural. Molag Bal's realm is unnatural. It is built on the subversion of will. Vampirism, at its core, is about stealing life to sustain a lie. It is non-consensual by definition. You take blood from sleeping victims. You take life to prolong your own unnatural existence. You're acting out the micro-version of Bal's macro-philosophy every time you feed. Even the specific Mace of Molag Bal, which you likely acquired earlier, synergizes terrifyingly well with the vampire build, absorbing magicka and stamina. But wielding it as a vampire feels different. It feels like you've stopped fighting the influence and just given in. You become the bad guy of the server, and while playing the villain can be fun, serving this specific villain feels dirty. It's not the cool intellectual evil of Hermaeus Mora, or the revolutionary evil of Mehrunes Dagon. It is just sad, abusive, pathetic evil. When you look at your character in the menu, with those glowing eyes and that sneer, remember who gave you that face. Remember that your power comes from the anguish of a priestess who just wanted to heal people. Remember that your lord form is a mockery of the human shape, designed by a god who hates humanity. Joining the vampires is not an ascension, it is a submission. You have submitted to the worst bully in the playground of the gods, and no amount of drain life damage can wash away the stain of that allegiance. You are now, and forever, a pawn of the King of Rape, and that is a label that doesn't wash off. Having pledged your soul to the darkest deity in the cosmos, you might expect your earthly rewards to be somewhat luxurious. You envision a dark citadel of majesty, a gothic palace where you can brood in style. Instead, you get Castle Volkihar, and reason number 7 to rethink your life choices is simply this. Castle Volkihar is a logistical and aesthetic nightmare that represents a massive downgrade in your quality of living. If Skyrim had a real estate market, this place would be listed as a teardown in a challenging neighbourhood. let's talk about location, location, location. Most players choose homes based on convenience. Breeze Home is great because it's next to a blacksmith. Proudspire Manor is expensive but situated in the capital. Castle Volkihar is located on a freezing jagged rock off the coast of Harfingar, literally as far northwest as you can go without falling off the map. It is remote. It is desolate. To get there, you have to take a boat. There are no roads. There are no carriages. If you need to buy a loaf of bread or sell a dragon bone, you are looking at a fast travel commute that feels like a punishment. You are effectively living in exile. Once you step inside, the grandeur quickly gives way to the realization that vampires have terrible taste in interior design. The castle is a labyrinth of damp stone, cobwebs, and literal gore. The lighting is non-existent, which makes sense for vampires, but for a player trying to navigate, it's just annoying. You find yourself constantly bumping into pillars or getting stuck on uneven geometry. It smells of rot and sea salt. It is cold. There are no hearths roaring with fire, because remember, fire is bad, so the ambient temperature is likely hovering just above freezing. You're living in a meat locker. The layout is the true enemy here. Castle Volkihar is a masterclass in inefficiency. The crafting stations are scattered. The forge is in one corner, the alchemy table in another, and the enchanting table somewhere else entirely. In a Hearthfire home, you can build a crafting room where everything is within arm's reach. Here, crafting a dagger and enchanting it requires a 5-minute jog through multiple load screens. It completely disrespects the player's time. You spend half your gameplay session just walking from the front door to your bedroom, and let's discuss the bedroom situation. As a vampire, you're expected to sleep in a coffin. Mechanically, this grants the vampiric blood rested bonus, giving you a resistance to magic boost. But aesthetically, it's miserable. You're sleeping in a wooden box in a communal room. There is zero privacy. Orthiolf is wandering around. The death hounds are barking. Compare this to the master bedroom in Solitude with its 4-poster bed, safe and wardrobe. In Volkihar, you are essentially homeless, crashing on a couch that happens to be a casket. There is no sense of home. You can't display your loot properly. There are no mannequins to show off your armor collections in the main hall. It's a barracks, not a home. The dining hall is particularly grotesque. Instead of tables laden with venison and mead, the tables are strewn with human remains. Skulls, bloody rags, and pieces of cattle are the centerpieces. It's meant to be horrific, and it succeeds. But it also means you can never have a normal moment. You can't just sit down and read a book without looking at a severed arm. It wears on you. The novelty of the House of Horrors vibe fades after the third time you trip over a ribcage. You start to miss the warm wooden interiors of the bannered mare. You miss rugs. You miss sunlight streaming through windows. You miss not living in a slaughterhouse. There is a core in-game fact that frustrates completionists: the ruined wing. When you first arrive, a huge portion of the castle is filled with rubble and undead skeletons. You eventually gain access to the courtyard and the study, but the castle never truly feels repaired. Even after you defeat Harkon and take ownership, you can't hire a contractor to fix the place up. The windows remain broken. The rubble stays in the corners. You are the lord of the castle, but you live in a ruin. The Hearthfire DLC, released around the same time, lets you build a pristine mansion from the ground up. The contrast is jarring. You can build a better house with some clay and lumber than the ancient fortress of the vampire lords. This leads to a common community debate: Volkihar versus Fort Dawnguard. Fort Dawnguard is also a castle, but it feels alive. It has a forge that actually looks used. It has training grounds. It has light. As you recruit members, the fort cleans up. Boxes are unpacked. Cobwebs are swept away. It feels like a base of operations that is growing. Castle Volkihar feels stagnant. It is a tomb. The NPCs there don't do much. They stand around, leaning against walls, repeating the same 3 lines of dialogue about how much they hate each other. There is no sense of progression or improvement. You're ruling over a cemetery. The Feng Shui is also actively hostile to your followers. The pathfinding in Castle Volkihar is notorious. Followers get stuck on the stairs. They get lost in the torture chamber. If you tell Serana to wait, she might glitch into a wall. The complex geometry of the Gothic architecture seems to confuse the AI mesh, leading to moments where you're running around the castle shouting for your companion like a lost parent in a supermarket. Lydia? Lydia? Where are you? Oh, you're stuck behind a gargoyle again. Then there are the amenities, or lack thereof. There is no general merchant in the castle. There is Ronthil, who sells some spells and potions, and Ferran Sadri, who offers radiant quests. But if you want to sell your generic loot, you have to leave. The castle is not self-sufficient. You are the Lord of the Night, but you still have to commute to Solitude, to sell your junk. It breaks the immersion of being a powerful isolationist. You're still dependent on the economy of the living. An obscure lore tidbit adds to the depression. The castle's history suggests it was built in an era when Harkon was a mortal king, but the modifications made for vampirism have essentially gutted its original function. The garden is a withered courtyard where Valerica tried to grow ingredients for the Soul Cairn portal. It's a dead garden. Nothing grows there but death bells and nightshade. Contrast this with the greenhouse you can build in your own home, bursting with life and colour. The castle represents the sterility of vampirism. It is a place where nothing new can be created, only preserved in a state of decay. And let's not forget the cattle pen, again. Having a dungeon full of moaning thralls downstairs is a buzzkill. It creates a constant audio backdrop of suffering. Unless you are role-playing a complete psychopath, it's hard to relax when you can hear people being tortured in the basement. It adds a layer of grime to the audio landscape. You want to listen to the spooky castle music, but it's interrupted by, please, no more. It's effective horror design, but terrible player housing design. Finally, there is the isolation from the random encounters of the world. At Lakeview Manor, a giant might attack your cow, or a bandit might try to rob you. It's dynamic. At Castle Volkihar, nothing happens. No one attacks the castle, except during the questline. No couriers can find you easily. You're cut off from the emergent gameplay that makes Skyrim special. You're sitting on your throne, alone, in the dark, with nothing to do but stare at the wall and wait for your magicka to regenerate. So, reason number 7 is that the real estate is a trap. You're trading a cozy, functional home for a damp, inconvenient, broken-down fortress that smells like blood and old stone. You're moving into a house that hates you. You will spend more time fast-travelling to and from your home than actually enjoying it. It is the ultimate case of buyer's remorse, only you paid with your soul instead of gold septims. Leaving the damp, depressing halls of Castle Volkihar behind, let us gaze across the water toward the faction you spurned. By choosing the path of the vampire, you didn't just choose a bad roommate situation with Harkon. You voluntarily walked away from the single greatest military-industrial complex in the Fourth Era. Reason number 8 is the heartbreaking realization that you have forfeited the Dawnguard's superior arsenal. You have brought a knife, or rather a pair of sharp teeth, to a gunfight. And in Skyrim, the gun is a dwarven crossbow with explosive ammunition. The disparity in war gear between the two factions is laughable. It is as if one side is fighting with sticks and stones while the other has discovered gunpowder. When you side with the vampires, you get rings, a few amulets that buff your gargoyles or your drain life spell. They are cute trinkets. But when you side with the Dawnguard, you gain access to the ancient technology questline given by Serene Gerard. This isn't just loot, it is a technological revolution. Let's start with the crown jewel, the enhanced dwarven crossbow. This weapon is a beast. In a game dominated by stealth archers using bows that require a long draw time, the crossbow changes the rhythm of combat entirely. It is point-and-click lethality. It has a built-in 50% chance to stagger enemies. That stagger is a game changer. It stops a charging bandit chief in his tracks. It interrupts a mage casting a fireball. But the enhanced version, which you miss out on by being a vampire, ignores 50% of the target's armor. This is a statistical anomaly in Skyrim. Armor penetration is rare. To have it baked into a ranged weapon means that heavily armored enemies, ebony warriors, Draugr deathlords, might as well be wearing paper. And then there are the bolts. The vampires have nothing comparable. The Dawnguard has exploding bolts. Serene teaches you how to craft bolts tipped with fire, frost and shock salts. These aren't just for show, they deal area of effect damage. You can shoot the ground near an enemy and still hurt them. You can fire a shock bolt into a group of mages and drain their magicka instantly. The tactical flexibility is immense. As a vampire, you are stuck casting Vampire Seduction on a bandit who is currently putting an exploding bolt through your chest. The math just doesn't work in your favour. The fan community has long debated the crossbow versus bow meta. While the longbow has a faster fire rate if you have the quick shot perk, the crossbow has a higher base damage and a flatter trajectory. It is the sniper's choice. The sound design alone, that heavy mechanical thunk followed by the crank of the reload, is incredibly satisfying. It feels powerful. By joining the vampires, you're locked out of crafting these beauties. Sure, you might loot a basic steel crossbow off a dead hunter, but you will never learn the schematics for the dwarven tech. You are stuck with the entry-level model while your enemies are fielding military-grade hardware. But the arsenal isn't limited to physical projectiles. The Dawnguard also holds the monopoly on sun magic. This is a school of restoration magic specifically designed to destroy the undead. Spells like Sunfire, Stendarr's Aura, and the aptly named Vampire's Bane are exclusive to the faction. Now, you might think, why would I want spells that kill undead if I am undead? The answer is, because half the enemies in Skyrim are undead, Draugr are everywhere, dragon priests are undead, skeletons are undead. These spells are incredibly magicka efficient, and unlike fire spells, they do 0 damage to living followers. You can spam Vampire's Bane into a melee where Lydia is fighting a Deathlord, and she won't feel a thing. It is the ultimate friendly fire safe magic. As a vampire, not only can you not buy these spells, but they are actively harmful to you. You're denied the most efficient tool for clearing dungeons. Then we have the relics. The Dawnguard Rune Axe and the Dawnguard Rune Shield are unique, gimmicky items that actually open up new playstyles. The Rune Axe gains power for every undead you kill, resetting at sunrise. It encourages a purge playstyle where you try to rack up a high score before dawn. The Rune Shield creates a Stendarr's Aura damaging field when you bash with it. These are fun, interactive toys. The vampire equivalents, the Ring of the Beast, which gives you more health and claw damage, and the Ring of the Erudite, which gives magicka regen. They are passive stat sticks. They are boring. They don't change how you play, they just make the numbers slightly bigger. The Dawnguard gear invites you to experiment, the vampire gear just asks you to wear it. Let's not forget the heavy support, armoured trolls. If you join the Dawnguard, you can recruit an armoured troll as a pet follower. It's a troll, in armour. It is a tanky, regenerating wall of muscle that can soak up damage for days. What do the vampires get? Deathhounds, Kusith, and Garma. They are dogs, they are fragile, they die quickly. Their bite does frost damage, which is nice, but most Nords are resistant to frost anyway. Walking into battle with an armoured troll feels like you are commanding a siege unit. Walking in with a Deathhound feels like you're taking your pet for a walk in a bad neighbourhood. There is a core in-game fact regarding the vendors that rub salt in the wound. Gunmar and Serene Gerard are master-level trainers in smithing and archery, respectively. Having them in your base means easy access to training for 2 of the most important skills in the game. In Castle Volkihar you have trainers, but they are less convenient. You have to hunt them down in the winding halls, and Serene is the only merchant who stocks the bolts in bulk. If you are a vampire who managed to steal a crossbow, you will constantly be running out of ammo because you can't buy it from the source. You're scavenging for bolts like a rat, while the Dawnguard agents are swimming in them. An obscure lore tidbit found in the journals of the Dawnguard members reveals that this technology isn't actually new. It's rediscovered. The crossbows are Dwemer designs that Isran hoarded. This implies that the vampires, who are ancient beings, should technically know about this stuff. Harkon has been alive for thousands of years. Why didn't he invent a better weapon? Why is his master plan relying on magic claws and biting? It highlights the stagnation of the vampire intellect. They rely so heavily on their innate biological curse that they have stopped innovating. The mortals, however, knowing they are weak, built machines to compensate. And in the rock, paper, scissors of Tamriel, the machine beats the monster. We must also address the Zephyr Bull. While technically obtainable by anyone who does the Lost to the Ages quest, which often overlaps with Dawnguard exploration, the synergy with the Dawnguard faction is stronger. The faction is built around ranged superiority. Isran gives you a crossbow the moment you walk in. Harkon gives you a disease. The philosophical difference is striking. The Dawnguard empowers you with tools. The vampires infect you with a burden. The sheer aesthetic of the Dawnguard armour also deserves a mention here. It comes in light and heavy variants, and it looks professional. It has a Van Helsing vibe. Leather straps, high collars, plate steel. It looks like gear designed for a job. The vampire royal armour looks like a costume. It's great for a masquerade ball, but for trekking through a swamp, it looks out of place. And mechanically, the Dawnguard full helmet offers a complete set bonus that reduces damage from vampires by 25%. This is a massive buff if you're fighting the other side. The vampire armor gives you Magica Regeneration. Again, useful, but not a hard counter to a specific enemy type. Even the Radiant quests for the Dawnguard feel more rewarding because they grant you access to these upgrades. You go find a schematic, you bring it back, and boom, now you can buy exploding firebolts. There is a tangible sense of R&D progression. The vampire Radiant quests are just, go kill this person, or go plant this evidence. There is no tech tree. You don't unlock enhanced fangs or exploding bats. You stagnate at the power level you received on day 1. So, reason number 8 is about the toys. We all love loot. We all love getting that new shiny weapon that makes the bad guys explode. By joining the vampires, you lock yourself out of the best toy store in Skyrim. You watch from the shadows as the Dawnguard players enact their medieval special forces fantasies, breaching rooms with crossbows and rune hammers, while you are stuck playing with your hands. You have traded technological superiority for a parlour trick, and when a heavily armoured troll is charging you, you will wish you had those exploding bolts. While we are lamenting the loss of explosive crossbow bolts and armoured trolls, we must turn our gaze upward to the ultimate goal of your new boss. Lord Harkon's entire motivation, the driving force behind every quest you undertake for the Volkihar, is the fulfillment of the tyranny of the sun prophecy. He wants to take Oriel's bow, dip some arrows in the blood of a daughter of Cold Harbour, and shoot out the sun. It sounds metal. It looks dramatic. But reason number 9 is that this plan is, scientifically and logically, the single stupidest idea in the history of Tamriel. It is not just villainous, it is ecological suicide. Let's break this down with some basic biology that Harkon seems to have missed during his thousands of years of brooding. The food chain is a pyramid. At the bottom, you have producers, plants. They need sunlight to grow. Above them, you have primary consumers, cows, deer, rabbits, and the Nords who farm wheat and potatoes. Above them, you have the apex predators. In this ecosystem, the vampires are the apex of the apex. You feed on the humans feed on the crops and the livestock crops and livestock feed on the sun. If Harkon succeeds in permanently blotting out the sun, not just for a day, as the game mechanic allows, but forever, as is his stated goal, he destroys the foundation of his own food supply. Without the sun, the plants die within weeks. The wheat fields of Rorikstead wither, the cabbages in Whiterun turn to black mush. Without fodder, the cows and goats starve, the deer population collapses. This leads to a massive famine for the mortal population. The cattle that vampires rely on for blood will start dying off in droves. The survivors will be malnourished, their blood likely thin and sustaining neither life nor magic. By liberating vampires from the sun, Harkon is effectively burning down the supermarket to steal a candy bar. He creates a world where his kind can walk freely outside, but there will be nobody left to eat. It is a plan with zero long-term viability. It assumes that vampires exist in a vacuum, independent of the world's biological systems, when in reality they are parasites who require a healthy host to survive. If you kill the host, the parasite dies. It's that simple. There is a core in-game fact that makes this even more baffling. Valerica, Harkon's wife, knows this. When you finally track her down in the Soul Cairn, she gives you a lecture on why she hid the Elder Scroll. She explicitly states that the tyranny of the sun would force the mortal races to unite and hunt the vampires to extinction. But she misses the ecological angle too. She worries about a war. She should be worried about starvation. The game shows us that Harkon is blinded by obsession, but it doesn't quite hammer home just how quickly Skyrim would turn into a frozen dead rock without Magnus in the sky. Speaking of frozen rocks, let's talk about temperature. Skyrim is already a subarctic province. The sun provides necessary heat. If you remove the primary heat source, the temperature plummets. We are talking about an ice age that would make the Atmacran freeze look like a summer vacation. The oceans would freeze, the passes would become impassable, the Nords, hardy as they are, would freeze to death in their homes. And while vampires have a resistance to frost, they still inhabit physical bodies that can freeze solid. You might not die from the cold in the same way a mortal does, but good luck trying to move your limbs when they are encased in a block of ice at absolute zero. This leads to a fascinating bit of obscure lore regarding the metaphysics of the sun itself. In the Elder Scrolls cosmology, the sun is not a ball of burning gas. It is a hole in the fabric of oblivion. torn by Magnus the Architect as he fled creation to return to Aetherius. This hole allows raw magicka to flow into Mundus. It is the source of all magic. If you blot out the sun, are you just blocking the light, or are you plugging the hole? If it's the latter, you might be cutting off the flow of magicka to the world. Think about the implications. If the magicka stops flowing, do spells still work? Does the enchantment on your armour fail? Do the magical bonds that animate your undead body unravel? Harkon relies on magic for everything. His teleportation, his life drain, his dominance. He is proposing to board up the window through which the very energy that sustains his unnatural existence enters the world. It's possible that by conquering the sun, he would inadvertently depower every mage and magical creature in Nirn, turning himself into nothing more than a withered corpse with a biting habit. The fan community has debated the Falmer theory in relation to this. If the surface world becomes plunged into eternal darkness, the distinction between the surface and the underground vanishes. The Falmer, the betrayed snow elves, thrive in the dark. They are blind, relying on hearing and smell. They have adapted perfectly to a lightless existence. If the sun goes out, the Falmer have no reason to stay in Blackreach. They would surge to the surface, and there are millions of them. Harkon thinks he's creating a paradise for vampires, but he is actually creating a playground for the Falmer. A war between the Volkihar and the Falmer in the pitch black of an eternal night is a war the vampires might lose. The Falmer are numerous, organised, and use poisons that can paralyse even the undead. By destroying the day, Harkon removes the one barrier keeping the nightmares of the deep from claiming the surface. He is inviting a competitive invasive species into his territory. Let's also consider the Nirnroot factor. We know from the quest A Return to Your Roots in Blackreach that Crimson Nirnroot relies on the ambient radiation of the geode veins, but surface Nirnroot, and indeed most alchemy ingredients, relies on the sun. As a player, you rely on potions. Health potions, invisibility potions, resistance potions. These require wheat, blue mountain flowers, blisterwort. All of these are plants. If the sun dies, alchemy dies. You are cutting off your supply of medical supplies. Imagine fighting a legendary dragon, who, by the way, probably won't like the dark either, without any potions because the last blue mountain flower wilted 3 years ago. There is a grim irony in the blood-cursed elven arrows mechanic you get in the game. When you shoot the sun, the sky turns a sickly violet red. The sun becomes a black hole rimmed with fire. It looks apocalyptic. NPCs in towns react with terror. What is happening to the sky? They scream. They run inside. The guards cower. It disrupts the routine of the world. But note that they run inside. They lock their doors. If this becomes permanent, the free-range feeding that vampires enjoy stops. Humans will become subterranean, fortifying their basements, living in bunkers. The easy pickings of a drunk wandering home from the tavern will disappear. You will have to siege every house just to get a snack. Furthermore, the plane-meld parallel cannot be ignored. Molag Bal, your patron, wants to merge the worlds. A world without a sun, cold and dead, looks a lot like Cold Harbour. Harkon is essentially terraforming Nirn to look like hell. But Cold Harbour is a place of torment, not comfort. Even the Daedra there seem miserable. Why would you want to bring that property value to Skyrim? The ecological collapse would also affect the dragons. Dragons are timeless, but they seem to enjoy the domination of the sky. If the sky's ruined, Alduin might just decide to accelerate the eating of the world. Well, the World Eater might say, this place is broken anyway. Time to reset. Harkon's hubris might trigger the end of the Kalpa ahead of schedule. He's poking the bear, or rather the dragon, of the apocalypse. And what about the Hist? The sentient trees of Black Marsh are powerful eldritch entities. They have a connection to the sun and the natural order. If Harkon turns off the lights, the Hist are not going to take it lying down. They mutated the Argonians into super soldiers to fight the Oblivion crisis. If the sun goes out, they might unleash a new wave of biological horrors to cleanse the source of the darkness. Harkon is picking a fight with forces he doesn't understand. The Hist, the Thalmor, who view the sun as a link to their ancestry, the Sigic Order. He's uniting the entire world against him. It is the classic villain mistake, thinking only of the immediate win condition without considering the post-victory reality. I want to rule the world, Harkon cries. Okay, Harkon, you rule a frozen dead rock where the only living things are blind Falmer and starving bandits who have no blood left to drink. Congratulations, You are the king of nothing. So, reason number 9 is that the plan is a bust. It is a logical dead end. Joining the vampires means dedicating your time and effort to a project that, if successful, results in your own starvation. You're working for a boss whose business model is burn down the customer base. It is better to keep the sun. The sun makes the flowers grow, keeps the Nords fat and happy, and ensures that there is always a fresh supply of blood walking around, blissfully unaware of the predator in the shadows. Don't kill the golden goose, or in this case, the golden ball of magicka, just because you forgot to buy sunscreen. We've covered the toxic boss, the freezing castle, and the plan to starve the entire planet. But every adventurer knows that the real weight of a quest isn't the armor you wear, it's the company you keep. And if you join the vampires, your primary companion is Serana. This brings us to reason number 10, the exhausting and never-ending saga of Serana's family trauma. You think you're signing up for a gothic romance or a badass partnership? Think again. You are signing up to be an unpaid family therapist for a 4,000-year-old teenager with the most complicated baggage in Tamriel. Let's look at the core in-game reality of this relationship. Serana is a mandatory follower for the vast majority of the Dawnguard questline. You cannot fire her. You cannot tell her to wait at home while you handle business. She's glued to your side, and for the duration of this forced proximity, the conversation revolves around exactly one topic: how terrible her parents are. Now, to be fair, her parents are terrible. We've established that Harkon is a monster and Valerica is, well, complicated. But dealing with Serana's processing of this trauma is a full-time job. From the moment you wake her up in Dim Hollow Crypt, the daddy issues are front and centre. She oscillates wildly between fearing Harkon, hating him, and weirdly defending the family unit that hasn't existed since the Second Era. You spend hours listening to her monologue about how father wasn't always like this, or mother is just as controlling. It's heavy, it's relentless. In a game where you usually talk about dragons and loot, you're suddenly thrust into a melodrama that feels like a supernatural episode of Dr. Phil. The mommy issues are just as prevalent. When you finally reach the Soul Cairn to find Valerica, you expect a tearful reunion. Instead, you get a shouting match. Serana and Valerica bicker. They air centuries of grievances while you stand there, awkwardly holding your weapon, waiting for the quest update to trigger. Valerica judges Serana's choices. Serana resentfully craves Valerica's approval while rejecting her control. You are the third wheel in a domestic dispute that spans planes of existence. You want to shout, "Ladies, please, I just want the Elder Scroll so we can leave this purple hellscape." But instead you have to navigate dialogue options that act as mediation. Maybe you should listen to your mother, you say, dying a little inside. This emotional labour is compounded by an obscure but persistent mechanical quirk: Serana's complaint dialogue. Bethesda programmed her to be more aware of her surroundings than vanilla followers like Lydia. The intention was to make her feel alive. The result is that she complains about everything. If it's sunny, she complains about the brightness. Fair enough, she's a vampire. If it's raining, she complains about the gloom. If you are in a cave, she hits you with the classic line, "I've spent enough. Time in caves to last a lifetime." If you go outside, she wonders if it's safe. If you go into a dwarven ruin, she dislikes the machinery. There is no winning. You're travelling with a person who finds a way to be unhappy in every biome of Skyrim. It wears you down. You start to miss the stoic silence of a generic mercenary who just says, "I am your sword and your shield." Then there is the necromancy problem. Serana is a powerful mage, which is great on paper, but her AI has a peculiar prioritization for the reanimate corpse spell. She will resurrect anything, and I mean anything. You finish a glorious battle against a dragon priest, and you turn around to see Serana fighting by your side with a resurrected chicken, or a skeever, or a bandit who is naked because you already looted his armor. It ruins the epic aesthetic. You're posing for a screenshot, the Dragonborn in full Daedric glory, and next to you is a glowing, moaning pile of ash that used to be a mud crab because Serana thought it would turn the tide of battle. Furthermore, these reanimated minions eventually disintegrate into ash piles. These ash piles do not despawn quickly. If you spend a lot of time in one area, or in your own home, if she starts a fight there, you end up with little piles of grey dust everywhere. It's messy. It's undignified. It turns every battlefield into a janitorial nightmare. The fan community has a complex relationship with Serana, often dubbed the Serana waifu phenomenon. She is, without a doubt, the most popular follower mod subject. People love her voice acting, courtesy of the talented Laura Bailey, and her unique animations like leaning against walls or using crafting tables. But there is a massive debate and a source of deep frustration regarding the friend zone. In the vanilla game, you cannot marry Serana. It is impossible. No matter what dialogue options you choose, no matter how much you support her through her trauma, she will ultimately reject a proposal. She cites her history with Molag Bal and her family baggage as reasons why she can't be intimate or trust anyone like that. "I don't think I can ever be comfortable in a temple," she says, referencing the horrors of her turning. From a narrative standpoint, this is brilliant writing. It respects her trauma. It makes sense that someone who underwent a ritual rape by a Daedric prince wouldn't be ready to hop into a Mara ceremony. But from a player perspective, it is the ultimate tease. The game forces you to build this deep emotional connection, makes you her sole confidant, and then puts up a brick wall. You're trapped in an eternal platonic limbo. You are her protector, her therapist, her best friend, but you will never be her partner. For players who join the vampires specifically for the romance of the Gothic duo, this is a slap in the face. You get the baggage without the bond. There is also the issue of her anachronism. Serana has been asleep for thousands of years. She's from the Second Era, or possibly late First Era. The world has changed. Empires have risen and fallen. Talos became a god. The tribunal disappeared. Yet, Serana rarely engages with this history in a meaningful way beyond general confusion. She's a woman out of time, but the game doesn't let you fully explore that. She doesn't ask you to explain who Tiber Septim is. She doesn't marvel at the College of Winterhold. She remains insular, focused inward on her family. It's a missed opportunity for lore dialogue that could have broken up the monotony of the "I hate my dad" track. Furthermore, her combat style can be incredibly disruptive to a stealth player. As a vampire, you're often incentivized to sneak, especially with the Embrace of Shadow's power. Serana, however, is aggressive. The moment an enemy red dot appears on the compass, she is launching ice spikes. She breaks stealth constantly. If you're trying to be a silent predator of the night, she is the loud friend who knocks over the vase. "Where'd you come from?" she shouts, blasting a Draugr you are about to backstab. You find yourself constantly reloading saves because your follower has zero chill. And let's talk about the friendly fire with other followers. If you try to run a party using mods or quest-specific temporary followers, Serana's area of effect spells, specifically her Ice Storm, often hit your other allies. This causes them to turn hostile. Suddenly Fendal is shooting arrows at Serana. Serana is draining Fendal, and you are standing in the middle trying to cast Pacify on your own team. Her magic is reckless. She fights like she's the only one who matters, which given her upbringing makes sense, but it makes her a liability in group tactics. We must also address the Cure questline. If you stick with the Dawnguard, you can eventually convince Serana to cure herself of vampirism. It's a touching conclusion to her arc. She chooses to be human again, to leave the darkness behind. But if you join the vampires, you can't really push for this. It would be hypocritical. "Hey, you should cure yourself," says the guy currently eating a bandit. So you are stuck with her in her undead state. She remains a daughter of Cold Harbour. She never gets that closure. Her arc feels incomplete on the vampire path. She just trades one vampire lord, Harkon, for another, you. She remains trapped in the life she hates. There is a moment in the quest, Touching the Sky, where you enter the Forgotten Vale. It is breathtaking. Glaciers, waterfalls, unique wildlife. It is one of the most beautiful places in the game. And what is Serana doing? She is usually complaining about the cold or the distance. It dampens the sense of wonder. You want to soak in the majesty of the Chantry of Auriel, and she's beside you muttering about how her feet hurt, figuratively. It's like taking a teenager to the Grand Canyon and they just stare at their phone, the whole time. Finally, there is the sheer length of the quest line where you're shackled together. The Dawnguard main quest is long. You go to Dim Hollow, then the castle, then to find the Moth Priest, then to the Soul Cairn, then to the Glade, then to the Vale, then back to the castle. It is hours and hours of gameplay. By the end of it, even the most patient player is usually sick of her voice. The charm of the mysterious vampire girl wears off around the time you're running circles in the Soul Cairn looking for page 7 of Jub's opus. You start to view her not as a character, but as a walking inventory slot that talks too much. So, reason number 10 is the emotional fatigue. Serana is a well-written character, perhaps too well written. She brings a level of realistic, heavy, unresolved drama that clashes with the escapist power fantasy of the rest of the game. Joining the vampires means you are locked in a room with this drama forever. You become the receptacle for her angst, the mediator of her family feuds, and the janitor of her ash piles. It is a high-maintenance relationship with very little payoff, leaving you drained, annoyed, and wishing you could just trade her in for a quiet armoured troll who knows how to keep its mouth shut. If the domestic disputes of the Volkihar family haven't completely drained your spirit, the location where you attempt to resolve them certainly will. Reason number 11 is the Soul Cairn. By following the vampire path, or indeed the Dawnguard questline generally, though the vampires have a special spiritual connection to it, you are forced to visit one of the most depressing, visually monotonous, and metaphysically horrifying planes of existence in the entire Elder Scrolls cosmology. If Sovngarde is the Nordic Valhalla, a hall of feasting and glory, the Soul Cairn is the DMV of the afterlife, a grey, infinite parking lot where you wait forever and nothing happens. Let us begin with the aesthetic assault. The moment you step through the portal in Valerica's study, your screen is washed in a filter of relentless bruising purple. The sky is not a sky. It is a swirling violet void filled with slow-moving thunderheads and a massive dark hole that looks like a bruised eye staring down at you. The lighting is flat and oppressive. There is no day or night cycle here, only an eternal gloomy twilight. It is a visual representation of stagnation. After 20 minutes in the Soul Cairn, you will find yourself physically squinting, desperate for a splash of green, a ray of yellow sunlight, or just the colour beige. It is sensory deprivation disguised as a level. The geography of the cairn is arguably the worst level design in Skyrim, intentionally or otherwise. It is a vast, flat wasteland dotted with black ruins and skeletal trees. The problem is the lack of landmarks. Everything looks the same. A pile of bones here looks exactly like the pile of bones 300 yards away. The map, usually your trusty guide, is notoriously useless here. It shows a flat, featureless plain with no clear paths. You find yourself running in circles, convinced you are making progress, only to pass the same weeping soul you passed 10 minutes ago. It is a navigational nightmare that induces a specific kind of gamer anxiety, the feeling of being hopelessly lost in a level that hates you. The inhabitants of this realm reinforce the grim reality of your chosen faction. The Soul Cairn is where souls go when they are trapped in black soul gems. Since vampires and necromancers are the primary users of black soul gems, this realm is essentially the landfill for your bad habits. The souls here are not tormented by demons with pitchforks. They are tormented by boredom and regret. They wander aimlessly, transparent and shivering. I was a soldier, one might say. I don't know how I got here. They are confused, stripped of their agency and left to rot. This is the ultimate fate of the cattle you feed on, the bandits you soul trap to recharge your enchanted sword and potentially you. This leads to a core in-game fact that many players find infuriating, the St. Jairb fetch quest. In the middle of this purple purgatory, you meet the ghost of Jairb, the Dunmer, who eradicated the cliff racers from Morrowind, a true hero. He asks you to find 10 pages of his opus, scattered randomly across this massive featureless map. There are no quest markers for the pages. You have to comb the desert, pixel by pixel, looking for scraps of paper that blend into the ground texture. It is widely considered one of the most tedious quests in the game. It encapsulates the Soul Cairn experience, meaningless, repetitive labour in a void of nothingness. But let's talk about the landlords. The Soul Cairn is ruled by the Ideal Masters. These are not Daedric princes. They are not gods in the traditional sense. Obscure lore from the Battlespire era suggests they were once mortal necromancers from the Merethic era, who attained a form of transcendence through sheer accumulation of souls. They abandoned their physical bodies to become entities of pure magical consciousness. In the game, they appear as giant floating purple crystals that hover above ruins. They don't speak to you. They don't monologue like Harkon or Molag Bal. They just float there, silently draining your health if you get too close. There is something deeply unsettling about the Ideal Masters. They are impersonal. Molag Bal hates you. The Ideal Masters just want to process you. They view souls as currency, as batteries to fuel their eternal existence. They are cosmic capitalists of the spirit. By dealing with the vampires, who often barter with the ideal masters, Valerica herself made a deal with them, you are entering into a contract with entities that view you as a number on a spreadsheet. There is no glory in serving them, no passion in fighting them. They are just a bureaucratic wall of hunger. The fan community often debates the Sovngarde versus Soul Cairn dichotomy as the ultimate argument against the vampire lifestyle. The Nords believe in Sovngarde, a paradise of fighting and feasting. The Redguards have the far shores, the Khajiit have the sands behind the stars. Almost every race has a good place. But if you are a vampire, a creature of Molag Bal, or if you simply dabble too heavily in the dark arts, the law suggests your claim to those paradises is forfeit. You don't go to the Hall of Valor, you go here, to the Purple Place. There is a persistent fan theory that the Dragonborn, by entering the Soul Cairn, has permanently tainted their soul. Even if you don't fully die, you have walked the soil of the damned. You have been marked. The theory posits that Akatosh might not want a soul back that has been marinated in the necrosis of the cairn. Is it worth the risk? Is the power of the vampire lord worth an eternity of wandering a flat purple desert listening to skeletons groan? Speaking of skeletons, the enemies here are just as annoying as the terrain. The Bonemen, Mistmen and Wrathmen. They are skeletal variations that constantly spawn from the ground. They aren't particularly difficult, but they are persistent. You kill one, take 10 steps, and hear the rattle of bones again. It's attrition warfare. They chip away at your patience, and because the environment is so open, you often aggro them from miles away. You can't just travel, you are constantly swatting away undead flies. Then there is the tragedy of Durnavir. This undead dragon is arguably the most tragic character in the DLC. He is a dragon, a shard of time, a creature of infinite dominance, who was tricked by the ideal masters. He made a pact to guard Valerica in exchange for necromantic power, but the ideal masters defined until her death as the term of the contract. Since Valerica is a vampire and immortal, Durnafir is trapped forever. His body has rotted. He can never leave the cairn for long without disintegrating. When you defeat him and speak to him, he is polite. He calls you Kahnarin, Vanquisher. He teaches you a shout to summon him to Tamriel just so he can feel the wind on his wings for a few moments. It is heartbreaking. Here is a creature of majesty reduced to a prisoner in a bleak dimension. His fate serves as a grim mirror to your own potential future. Durnafir sought power through dark pacts, just like you did when you accepted Harkon's gift. Look where it got him. He is the ultimate cautionary tale. Read the fine print, or you'll end up rotting in a purple box. Mechanically, the Soul Cairn also introduces the lightning attractors. These are massive spires that you can interact with using Grand Soul Gems to turn them into Black Soul Gems. It's a mechanic that encourages you to embrace the darker side of enchanting. But think about the implication. You are using the infrastructure of this hellscape to facilitate the trapping of human souls. You are becoming a franchisee of the ideal masters. You are part of the supply chain that keeps this horrific place running. And let's not forget Arvak, the ghost horse. You have to find his skull. It's another fetch quest in the wasteland. While Arvak is a cool mount, he's a skeleton horse with purple flames, which admittedly matches the vampire aesthetic. Obtaining him requires you to witness the grief of his owner, a soul wandering the cairn calling for his lost steed. It's just another layer of sadness. The whole zone is drenched in melancholy. There is no triumph here. Even when you win by retrieving the scroll, you leave feeling heavy. The Soul Cairn is also a place where the game's collision physics seem to go to die. The bony protrusions and rubble piles are notorious for getting players stuck. You try to climb a small hill to get a better view, and you slide down or you clip into a ribcage. It adds a layer of jank to the horror. You aren't just trapped spiritually, you are trapped geometrically. For a vampire player, the Soul Cairn is presented as a place where you fit in. You don't need to be soul-trapped to enter, unlike a mortal Dragonborn who must sacrifice part of their soul or become a vampire. You can just walk in. The game treats this as a perk. Look, you don't have to get weaker to enter. But consider the subtext. You fit in because you are already dead. You fit in because you are already damned. The realm recognizes you as one of its own. That shouldn't feel like a perk. That should feel like a wake-up call. When the dimension of eternal misery opens its doors to you and says welcome home, it's time to reevaluate your life choices. So, reason number 11 is the destination. If you join the vampires, you are aligning yourself with the forces that populate the Soul Cairn. You're fighting to bring a piece of that bleakness to Tamriel. You're serving a master who would happily trade you to the ideal masters for a better spell tome. The Soul Cairn is a reminder that in the world of the undead there is no rest. There is only purple fog, endless walking, and the realization that you have traded the golden fields of Sovngarde for a desolate, infinite parking lot of souls. Let's say you've finally hit your breaking point. The constant sunburns, the deformed face, the toxic boss, and the bleak vacation to the Soul Cairn have finally convinced you that the vampire life isn't all it was cracked up to be. You want out. You want to feel the warmth of the sun again. You want to walk into a shrine of Archay without bursting into flames. But reason number 12 is that Skyrim does not let you just check out of this hotel. You have to deal with the absolute bureaucratic nightmare of curing vampirism, a process so tedious and shady it feels like filing your taxes in a swamp. In many modern RPGs, a respec or a cure is a simple transaction. You pay a priest some gold, a holy light flashes, and you're good to go. Not here. In Skyrim, the only person in the entire province who knows how to reverse your condition is a wizard named Falion, and he lives in Morthal. Now, if you haven't spent much time in Morthal, let me paint a picture for you. It is a depressing collection of shacks sinking into a freezing marsh. It is always foggy. The Jarl is having visions, the people are terrified of the dark, and there is absolutely nothing to do there. This is where you have to go to beg for your humanity back. You have to travel to the literal armpit of Skyrim to find the one guy who didn't skip necrotic reversal class at the College of Winterhold. When you find Falion, usually wandering the docks or ignoring his apprentice Agni, he doesn't exactly welcome you with open arms. He's suspicious, dismissive, and frankly a bit creepy. He knows what you are immediately. To get the quest, Rising at Dawn, you have to admit your condition to him. He then gives you a shopping list, and it's not a simple list like 3 Nirn roots. He demands a black soul gem. This is the core in-game hurdle that stalls so many players. Black soul gems are rare. In the early to mid-game, they are incredibly hard to find unless you know exactly where to look, like the depths of Blackreach or Enther's secret stash at the college. But finding the gem isn't enough. You have to fill it. And as any lore-savvy player knows, black soul gems can only hold the souls of sentient beings, specifically people. Consider the moral irony here. To cure yourself of being a monster who preys on humans, you must go out and murder a human and trap their soul in a crystal. You're committing a capital crime and a metaphysical atrocity just to get your tan back. It forces you to double down on your villainy one last time. You can't just soul trap a mud crab. You have to find a bandit or a lonely hunter or Nazim, actually that one's a public service, and harvest their soul. It makes the redemption feel tainted from step 1. Once you have the filled gem and return to Falion, the bureaucracy intensifies. He tells you to meet him at the summoning circle in the marsh at dawn. Not whenever you're ready. At dawn. Specifically between roughly 4 AM and 6 AM. If you arrive at 7 AM, too late. Come back tomorrow. If you arrive at midnight, wait in the swamp for 4 hours while frostbite spiders nip at your toes. This meeting is notoriously glitchy. The fan community is full of horror stories about Falion simply not showing up. He gets stuck on a bridge, he gets distracted by a slaughterfish, or worse, because you are a stage 4 vampire, he attacks you on sight when he finally does arrive, forgetting that he invited you there to cure you. You stand there, naked in the marsh, figuratively, hopefully, waiting for the wizard to perform the rite, and the game's AI decides to punch you instead. It is a moment of pure, unfiltered frustration. When the ritual actually works, it is underwhelming. Falion chants some vague lines about oblivion and returning life. The screen flashes a bit and that's it. You are cured. But there is a lingering sense of unease. Who is this guy? An obscure lore tidbit reveals that Falion is one of the few characters who claims to have walked the plains of oblivion and met the Dwemer. He was a teacher at the college but left because they disliked his research. That is code for he was doing some really dark stuff. By letting him perform this ritual on you, you are letting a rogue wizard tinker with your soul. Is the cure safe? Did he keep the black soul gem for something nefarious? You never find out. You just walk away, hoping your soul is still intact. This process highlights the sunk cost fallacy of the vampire playthrough. By the time you reach the point of wanting a cure, you have likely invested perk points into the vampire lord tree. You have unlocked summon gargoyle, mist form, and supernatural reflexes. When you cure yourself, you lose access to all of that. Those perk points are not refunded, they are frozen. You have effectively wasted levels. It feels bad. It feels like you threw your time into a void. There is a community debate regarding the lycanthropy loophole. Many players bypass Thalion entirely by simply asking Ayla the Huntress to turn them back into a werewolf if they have completed the companion's questline. The game script often overwrites vampirism with lycanthropy because you can't be both. It's faster, cheaper, and doesn't require a Black Soul gem, but it feels gamey. It feels like exploiting a code conflict rather than a narrative resolution. And if you've already cured lycanthropy once, Ayla might not offer it again, leaving you stuck with the Swamp Wizard. Even after you're cured, the stigma can linger due to bugs or delayed script updates. Guards might still say, "Don't like those eyes you got," bad hunger to them, even though your eyes are now a lovely normal blue. You know you are cured, but the world treats you like a recovering addict. You never quite shake the reputation, and let's be honest, the cure quest feels like a punishment for experimenting. Skyrim is usually about freedom, be who. You want, do what you want, but if you choose vampirism, the game makes the undo button as painful as possible. It's a deterrent. It's the developers saying, "Are you sure? Because going back is going to be a huge hassle." So reason number 12 is the exit strategy. It is the realization that leaving the vampire lifestyle involves a trek to a swamp, a premeditated murder to fill a soul gem, and a dawn appointment with a shady wizard who might just decide to glitch out and leave you stranded. It is a bureaucratic nightmare that makes you question why you ever accepted that blood-soaked gift in the first place. You are caught in a trap where staying is miserable, but leaving is a chore. We have survived the fire, the ice of the castle, the Soul Cairn, and the bureaucracy of the cure. But now we must address a subtler, more insidious betrayal. It comes from the one school of magic that is supposed to be your safety net. Reason number 13 is the friendly fire phenomenon, or the cruel realization that in the eyes of the game's mechanics, restoration is no longer a perfectly valid school of magic, it is a hazard. The irony here is palpable. Colette Morantz at the College of Winterhold is constantly complaining that nobody respects restoration. Well, as a vampire you respect it too much. You respect it the way a bug respects a bug zapper. The core in-game fact that drives this wedge between you and the light is the rigid separation of spell classes. In the base game, if you are a mortal and you get hurt, you can cast Healing Hands on your partner, or they can cast it on you. It is a warm golden glow that knits flesh back together. But the moment you turn into a vampire, you gain the undead keyword in the game's code. This changes everything. Standard healing spells often stop working on you effectively from external sources, or worse, the advanced holy spells begin to recognize you as a target. If you head to Ronthil in Castle Volkihar, you will notice he sells a specific line of spells, Necromantic Healing and Heal Undead. Why do these exist? Because standard Healing Hands does not work on the undead. If you have a vampire follower like Serana, or a reanimated zombie, and you try to be a good support character by blasting them with standard healing, nothing happens. You're just waving your hands in their face. You have to buy the evil version of the spell. This segregates your spellbook. You can no longer just be a healer. You have to be a necromancer, even if you're just trying to keep your dog alive. But the real danger comes from the area of effect, AoE spells used by the good guys. Let's look at the spell Guardian Circle. It is a master-level restoration spell that creates a zone of holy ground. Inside the circle, it heals the living and turns the undead. As a mortal, this is a sanctuary. As a vampire, this is a do not enter sign. If you step into a Guardian Circle cast by a high-level vigilant or a scripted event, you aren't healed, you're panicked. You might find your character fleeing uncontrollably because the game engine classifies you as a Draugr. You lose control of your hero because they are terrified of the holy carpet. Then there is the turn undead mechanic. High-level priests and vigilants of Stendarr love these spells. When you are a mortal, getting hit by a turn undead spell is like getting hit by a breeze. It does nothing. When you are a vampire, it is a crowd control nightmare. You get hit, your screen flashes blue, and you're sent running into a wall, unable to attack, unable to shout, just cowering in fear. It is humiliating. You are the Lord of the Volkihar, the Slayer of Alduin, and you are currently hiding under a table because a priest waved a glowing symbol at you. This hostility extends to artifacts. We must mention Dawnbreaker. Meridia's sword is the ultimate anti-undead weapon. Its enchantment, Meridia's Retribution triggers a massive explosion of holy fire when killing an undead enemy. If you are a vampire and you are using Dawnbreaker because it looks cool, you're playing with a live grenade. If the explosion triggers point blank while you're standing over the Draugr you just killed, you take damage. You're caught in the blast radius of your own weapon's hatred. It is the sword rejecting its wielder. It's a ludonarrative clash where the item in your hand fundamentally wants you dead. There is a fascinating debate in the fan community regarding the Necromage perk, which we touched on briefly before. To recap, the perk in the Restoration tree makes spells more effective against the undead. Because you are undead, it makes your spells more effective on yourself. Min-maxers love this. It makes your enchantment stronger, your duration longer. They argue this makes vampirism optimal, but let's look at the roleplay and logic implication, which leads to our obscure lore tidbit. Why does restoration magic hurt? In Elder Scrolls Metaphysics, restoration channels the energy of Aetherius, raw, creative light. Vampires are beings of the void, sustained by the suppression of life. When you cast a Necromage-boosted spell on yourself, you are essentially forcing two opposing cosmic forces to collide inside your body. The buff you receive is mechanically a positive number, but narratively it suggests a volatile reaction. You are overcharging your dead cells with energy they weren't meant to hold. You are a walking paradox, holding yourself together with the very energy that seeks to annihilate you. This friendly fire aspect effectively kills the paladin archetype for vampire players. You cannot roleplay a holy knight who happens to be a vampire, a popular trope in other fantasy settings, without fighting the game mechanics at every turn. You can't use the sun spells, you can't use the holy circles. You're mechanically pushed toward the shadow and destruction schools. The game pigeonholes you. Oh, you're a vampire. Here's a drain life spell and an ice spike. Have fun. Consider also the Scroll of Bane of the Undead. It's a powerful panic button item that clears rooms of skeletons. If you use it as a vampire, you are nuking yourself. You cast the scroll and suddenly you're taking damage and running away from your own centre of mass. It renders an entire class of loot, anti-undead scrolls, useless to you. They become vendor trash. Even the grand healing spell, which heals all allies in a radius, becomes unreliable. If you are running with a modded follower who plays a healer class or a vanilla follower with a healing staff, their attempts to aid you might fail because the heal other tag doesn't always register correctly on a player flagged as undead. You are watching your health bar, expecting a top-up from your support mage, and it never comes. You die because the game's logic dictates that you're not a valid recipient of love and light. So, reason number 13 is that the light hurts. By becoming a vampire, you cut yourself off from the support systems of the living. You can no longer walk into a temple and feel safe. You can no longer use the good guy spells without reading the fine print. You are isolated, forced to rely on dark magic and blood potions, because the universe's healthcare plan no longer covers your pre-existing condition of being dead. The fires of the sun, the freezing stones of the castle, the metaphysical horror of the Soul Cairn, and the betrayal of the healing arts, we have catalogued a litany of disasters. But reason number 14 brings the nightmare home to the streets where you live. It is the exhaustion of being public enemy number 1. It is the realization that by accepting the blood of the ancients, you have effectively put a kick me sign on your back that is visible to every guard, merchant, and chicken in the province. You're no longer a citizen, you're a target. Let's start with the core in-game reality of the bounty system regarding your nature. While the Dawnguard DLC mercifully patched out the vanilla mechanic where Stage 4 vampires were attacked on sight by everyone, a dark time for early adopters indeed, the underlying hostility of the lore remains a constant threat. If you ever make the mistake of transforming into a vampire lord in public, perhaps you hit the wrong button, or perhaps you just needed to fly over a fence, you instantly incur a 1,000 gold bounty. This isn't a petty theft charge, this isn't a disturbing the peace fine. 1,000 gold is the price for murder. The moment you reveal your true form, the game legally classifies you as a capital offender. Every guard in the hold becomes a red dot on your compass, and unlike a normal crime where you can sheath your weapon and pay the fine, guards often will not accept a yield from a hulking winged monster. You're forced to flee or massacre the town. If you choose the latter, your bounty skyrockets into the tens of thousands. You become the Butcher of Whiterun, not because you wanted to be, but because the game logic allows no nuance for a heroic monster. This legal status creates a pervasive paranoia. You are walking on eggshells. Even in your human form, the psychic guard phenomenon, a favourite topic of debate in the fan community, comes into play. We all know the meme: you steal a sweet roll in Markarth, and a guard in Riften knows about it. With vampirism, this hive mind omnipotence feels even more oppressive. As you walk past guards, even at stage 1 they know, they sniff the air. "I don't like those eyes you got," they mutter. "There's a bad hunger to them." Or the classic, "Keep your hands to yourself, sneak thief." They're profiling you. You're the Dragonborn, the Thane of their city, the person who just saved them from a dragon 5 minutes ago, and they treat you like a leper. It chips away at the power fantasy. You want to be the beloved hero, waving to the crowds. Too bad. You're the creepy guy everyone avoids making eye contact with. It creates a dissonance between your deeds and your reception. You save the world, but the world is disgusted by you. This social isolation forces a change in gameplay loops that is functionally exhausting. In a normal playthrough, you fast travel to the main gate of solitude, walk in, sell your loot, maybe craft some armour, and leave. As a vampire, especially if you're playing with immersion mods or simply role-playing the hunted aspect, you find yourself using the back doors. You sneak into Riften through the sewers, you avoid the main roads because of the Dawnguard patrols, and let's talk about those patrols. The Dawnguard does not just sit in their fort, they send hit squads, 3 heavily armoured hunters, often wielding those aforementioned enhanced crossbows, will spawn on the road specifically to kill you. This happens while you're doing other things. You could be in the middle of a heartwarming quest to help a farmer, or negotiating a peace treaty, and suddenly, thwack, a bolt hits you in the neck. "Vampire scum!" they scream. It turns the open world into a hostile zone. You can never truly relax. You can't just auto-walk down the road while checking your phone. You have to watch the horizon. And if you are in a city when a Dawnguard patrol spawns, which can happen, it causes chaos. The guards fight the Dawnguard? Sometimes. Or sometimes the guards join in to kill you. It's a coin toss. You are the variable that destabilizes the peace of every location you visit. There is an obscure lore tidbit that adds a tragic layer to this persecution. In the book Incident at Necrom, we see how vampires in Morrowind were treated, hunted ruthlessly by the Temple. But in Cyrodiil, during the Oblivion Crisis, the Count of Skingrad, Janus Hassildor, managed to rule while being a vampire. He is the gold standard of the civilized vampire. But note his life. He is a recluse. He relies on a small circle of trusted servants. He hides his condition with extreme paranoia. Even a count, a man of immense political power, lives in fear of exposure. If a count can't live openly, what chance do you, a wandering adventurer, have? Skyrim reinforces this. There is no legal way to be a vampire. There is no permit you can buy. You are illegal by existence. This illegality makes the Civil War questline incredibly awkward. You're trying to unite Skyrim under the Empire or the Stormcloaks. You stand next to General Tullius or Ulfric Stormcloak, giving rousing speeches about honour and the future. Meanwhile, you're a blood-drinking creature of the night. If Ulfric knew what you were, he'd chop your head off himself. "Skyrim belongs to the Nords," he shouts. You're technically a Nord, but you're also a corpse. You feel like a fraud. You're an infiltrator in your own story. The narrative friction is constant. You're fighting for a future that technically wants you dead. Then there is the shopkeeper stigma. While Skyrim doesn't go as hard as Morrowind, where merchants would literally refuse to speak to you, the ambient dialogue from shopkeepers becomes colder. Belethor might still buy your junk, but the warmth is gone. And if you accidentally hit stage 4 in the older versions of the game, or with hardcore mods enabled, the shops are closed to you. You are locked out of the economy. You have 50,000 gold, but you can't buy a sweet roll because the baker is screaming and running for the Jarl. The public enemy status also affects your home life. If you adopt children in the Hearthfire DLC, bringing them into this life feels irresponsible. You are bringing Dawnguard attacks to your doorstep. You come home to Lakeview Manor to find a vampire hunter shooting at your cow and your bard. You have endangered your family simply by existing. Pa, why are those men in armour trying to burn down the house? Well, son, because Papa needs to drink blood to survive. It's a tough conversation. Mechanically, this constant aggression forces you to rely on calm spells, illusion magic. You become a diplomat by force. You walk into a room, cast Pacify just to get people to stop screaming, buy your supplies, and leave before the spell wears off. It's a predatory way to interact with society. You're mind-controlling the populace just to get a haircut. It reinforces the idea that you are a monster. A hero inspires, a monster dominates. Molag Bal would be proud, but you just feel tired. The fan community often contrasts this with the grey cowl of Nocturnal from Oblivion. That artifact made you the famous thief known as the Grey Fox, instantly giving you a bounty, but taking it off removed the bounty. It was a toggle. Vampirism is a toggle that gets stuck. If you transform, you get the bounty. If you revert, the bounty should go away if no one saw you revert, but the stealth mechanics are finicky. If a slaughterfish saw you change, the guards know. The witness system in Skyrim is notorious. You can kill the last witness, but often the bounty lingers, a permanent stain on your record. And let's not forget the vigilance of Stendarr. Before Dawnguard, they were a joke. After Dawnguard, they are, well, still kind of a joke, but a persistent one. They wander the roads. They can cure diseases, which is ironic. If you walk up to them as a vampire, they attack. You lose access to the only mobile healthcare providers in the wilderness. You're cut off from the mercy of Stendarr. Being public enemy number 1 is exhausting because it turns the game into a stealth mission that never ends. You're Solid Snake, but there is no game over screen, just a constant state of alert. You miss the days when you could just walk into an inn, sit by the fire, and listen to the bard without checking the exits. You miss being part of Skyrim. Now, you are just a parasite living on its surface, tolerated at best, hunted at worst. You have traded the love of the people for fear, and while fear is a powerful tool, it is a very lonely companion on the long, cold roads of the north. We have reached the end of our dark chronicle. We have waded through the swamps of Morthal, endured the insults of guards, and stood shivering in the purple gloom of the Soul Cairn. If, after all of this, after the sunburns, the ugly face, the fire weakness, and the family drama, you're still looking for a supernatural power trip, let me offer you a final compelling alternative. Reason number 15 is simply the undeniable superiority of lycanthropy. If you must be a monster in Skyrim, do yourself a favour, join the companions, embrace the beast within, and run with the pack. Because Hircine offers a deal that Molag Bal can't even comprehend. Power without the paperwork. The fundamental argument for the werewolf is based on a single beautiful mechanic: the lack of passive penalties. As a vampire, your existence is a constant debuff management sim. You're weaker in the day, you're weaker to fire, you have to feed. As a werewolf in your human form, you are normal. Actually, you are better than normal. You possess 100% immunity to all diseases, no more rock joint from a wolf bite, no more whipbane from a trap. You are a healthy, robust adventurer who can walk in the sun, wear any armour you like, and speak to any NPC without them commenting on your skin condition. The curse of the werewolf is contained entirely within the transformation. You only face the consequences of being a beast when you choose to be a beast. It is an opt-in monster mode. Do you need to tear through a bandit camp, transform, mauling complete, revert eventually, and walk into Whiterun to sell the loot? There is no maintenance. You don't have to eat hearts every day to keep your stamina bar from shrinking. You don't have to avoid fire spells. You carry the power in your pocket, not on your face. Let's talk about the combat experience itself. The Vampire Lord is a caster. It hovers, it casts spells, it kites enemies, it's floaty. The werewolf is visceral, it is kinetic. The moment you transform, you feel the weight of the beast. The ragdoll mechanic is the star of the show here. A sprinting power attack from a werewolf sends enemies flying. I don't mean they stumble, I mean they are launched across the room. You can hit a giant and watch him tumble. You can smack a dragon priest off a cliff. It is pure, unadulterated stress relief. There is a primal joy in the werewolf moveset. The running on all fours, the savage roars, the brutal kill cams that the floaty, magical Vampire Lord simply lacks. Then there is the travel speed. Before you get the Summon Arvak spell, or if you just hate the clunky horse physics, the werewolf sprint is the fastest way to travel on land. You can outrun horses, you can outrun saber cats. If you're over-encumbered and need to get home, you can transform, which ignores carry weight, and sprint all the way to the city gates. It is a utility tool as much as a weapon. The fan community has long debated the one downside of lycanthropy, the loss of the well-rested bonus. Because your sleep is filled with beast blood dreams, you cannot get the 10% experience boost from sleeping in a bed, or 15% from the lover's comfort. Min-maxers argue this slows down levelling. But let's be real. By the time you're mid-game, leveling speed is rarely the bottleneck, and is a 10% XP loss really comparable to 0 stamina regeneration in sunlight? I would trade a slightly slower leveling curve for the ability to sprint during the day any time. The trade-off is laughably skewed in the werewolf's favour. Obscure lore supports the idea that Hircine is a better patron than Molag Bal. Hircine is the Daedric prince of the hunt. He is not evil in the sadistic sense, he is amoral like nature itself. He respects strength, he respects the predator. His realm, the hunting grounds, is described not as a place of torture, but as an endless, lush forest where you hunt and are hunted forever. For a warrior Nord, this is essentially a pagan version of Valhalla. It's not about submission, it's about the game. Compare this to Cold Harbour or the Soul Cairn. In Hircine's realm, you retain your agency. You are a hunter. In Bal's realm, you are a slave. Even the werewolf artifacts are better designed for fun. The Ring of Hircine allows for unlimited transformations per day. Once you have it, the one restriction, once a day, is gone. You can wolf out whenever you want. The Totems of Hircine questline adds utility, summoning spirit wolves, detecting life. It deepens the gameplay without adding chores. The social aspect is also cleaner. The Companions are the most respected guild in Skyrim. They are heroes. Even though the Circle has this dark secret publicly, you are a harbinger, a leader of warriors. The Volkihar are secluded weirdos living on an island. Being a companion gives you a sense of belonging to a brotherhood that actually likes each other. Skjor and Ayla treat you like family. Vilkas and Farkas are loyal brothers. There is camaraderie. In the Vampire Court, everyone is plotting to stab you. The pack dynamic is genuine. The court dynamic is fake. There is also a fascinating mechanical interaction with the feeding perk for werewolves. When you feed on a corpse as a werewolf, you heal massive amounts of health and extend your transformation time. This encourages a chain reaction playstyle. You run into a fort, kill, feed, keep running. It maintains momentum. The vampire feeding is a stealth action that slows you down. The werewolf feeding is a combat action that keeps you going. It flows with the rhythm of the game, and let's address the cure quest again. Curing lycanthropy is also a quest involving the heads of Glenmoral witches, but narratively it feels more heroic. You are fighting a spirit wolf to cleanse your soul, or Kodlax. It feels like a battle for redemption. The vampire cure is a shady transaction in a swamp. The werewolf questline treats the condition with a grim gravity, a burden of the blood that you can choose to carry or cleanse with steel. It feels noble. Even the DLC support for werewolves in Dawnguard was surprisingly robust. The werewolf perk tree, added in the expansion, turned the beast form from a mid-game gimmick into an end-game powerhouse. Perks like savage feeding, allowing you to feed on creatures, not just people, and the massive health boosts made it viable even on legendary difficulty. The developers knew that if they buffed vampires, they had to buff wolves to keep the rivalry alive, and they succeeded. Ultimately, the choice comes down to what you want your game to feel like. Do you want to play a gothic tragedy where you're constantly managing a disease, hiding from the sun, and dealing with a toxic family? Or do you want to play a heavy metal album cover where you turn into a giant wolf and throw bears off mountains? Hircine offers you a gift that enhances your physical power without compromising your daily life. He asks for your hunt, not your suffering. He gives you claws that tear through armour and legs that outrun the wind. He lets you be the Dragonborn and the beast. Molag Bal takes your day, your face and your soul, and gives you a drain life spell that costs too much magicka. It is the worst trade deal in the history of trade deals. So when the choice is presented, when Harkon holds out his hand offering you the power of the Lords, look at his pale, miserable face, look at the dusty hall, look at the meat on the table, and then politely decline. Turn around, walk out the door, take the boat back to the mainland and head to Whiterun. Go to Jorvaska, drink the mead, fight the fight, and when the moon rises, let the howl tear from your throat, knowing that when the sun comes up tomorrow, you'll be able to feel its warmth on your face, free and alive. And so, we come to the end of our long, dark night together. We have walked the frozen path from the first bite to the final cure. We have seen the allure of the shadows and the steep, punishing price they demand. We've laughed at the absurdity of the vampire lords and shuddered at the cold emptiness of their castles. If you are currently playing a vampire character, huddled in a cave waiting for 7 PM, do not despair. The journey to Morthal is long, but Falion is waiting. The sun is still there, burning behind the clouds, waiting to welcome you back to the land of the living. And if you're safe in your bed, mortal and warm, take a moment to appreciate the simple joy of a stamina bar that refills and a face that looks like your own. The world of the Elder Scrolls is vast, filled with choices that echo through eternity. But some paths are traps, glittering with false promises before snapping shut. Tonight we have disarmed the trap of the Volkihar. We have exposed the curse for what it is. You can rest easy now, knowing that you don't need glowing eyes to be powerful, and you certainly don't need to blot out the sun to leave your mark on the world. Let the fire in the hearth crackle low, let the wind howl outside, powerless to reach you. Close your eyes, breathe in the safety of the sanctuary we've built here tonight, and drift away from the cold harbour of nightmares into the warm golden fields of peaceful sleep. Sweet dreams.